Let's combat and fight back with MELTREK. The war of the minds, they want control of the masses. And Common Core, they dumb us down in the classes. Without knowledge, we can't gain access. Build with the elders, take notes and write classes. We keep whining on the block, how it's gonna stop? Let's start supporting our own, make their supply drop. We buy stocks, then we buy blocks. Cause we know the truth and we tuned in to Dr. Maat.
A BB Fahodie, a BB to me. Peace to all of my thinkers, truth speakers, and truth seekers. Welcome to another Truth to Power Talk with your sister, Dr. Maat. Thank you for joining another powerful discussion. And tonight I have with me another powerful guest, but he is no stranger, family, to the community. Baba Mwalimu K. Baruti. How are you doing tonight, Baba?
I'm doing excellent, and I'm glad to be here again and again and again and again.
Oh, Baba, we're blessed to have you. We're blessed to have you. We appreciate the work that you and Mama Ya have been doing in the community for decades, Baba. I still post clips from our previous interviews. Sometimes when you're posting like your quotes on Facebook, I'll take that, Baba, and I'll post it on my IG page, and people share it all over the place. And so, Baba, we appreciate you. We love you. We honor you. And Mama Ya, we honor you and we thank you, for all that you have done and all that you continue to do. Baba, I hope you know that I don't take our interactions for granted at all. When you when I text you and when you get back to me when you can, I'm just happy and thankful that you get back to me, because I know that you have a lot of things going on and a lot of people pulling at you, and you always make time for us, so no matter how busy you get, when the community says, Baba, can you come speak here? Baba, look, I need some advice with my children. I need something's going on with my marriage, or something's going on over here. You make yourself available to everybody, Baba. And when I think of a definition of a Baba, you are the epitome. You are the definition of a Baba, of an African man, of an African warrior, of an elder in training, right? Because you said you're not there yet as an elder Baba in training, but you are a beautiful, beautiful example of that. And there are many people in the community that share my same sentiments. So, Baba, we thank you, and we don't take our interactions with you for granted. Family, right now, take a moment out to thumb up this video. I see that a lot of you are coming in. Thumb up the video, family. Thumb it up, thumb it up, thumb it up. Also, share this video tonight. Bob is going to be dropping a lot of jewels, and we want to get this information out to the people, and each one teach one in the 21st century. So how can we do that? We have social media. All you have to do is just share the discussion on your social media pages. And if you don't have a social media page, take the link to this discussion, throw it in the family group chat or your friends group chat, right? And text it on now. Also, family, subscribe to my YouTube channel. Hit the notification bell. Whenever I go live, you'll be notified. So make sure you hit that notification bell, family. Subscribe. And then also, family, I created a Truth to Power Talk playlist. Make sure that you go back and check out some of these powerful discussions in the archive. All right, so let's jump into it, Baba. Well, before we do, Baba, let me acknowledge some people who are in the building. I see Sister Kiara's in the building. I see Watson, Hotep is in the building. Brother Bruce Lee. I see the Queen Mother Virgo Venom is in the building. Dr. Craig Samuels, peace to you, Dr. Craig Samuels in the building. I see Wisdom Bars are in the building, and Wisdom Bars says, a living ancestor. Ashe. So peace to all of the Maadian family in the building and all the Maadian family who will be watching this in the archives. Baba, you got a new book out. You got a new book out right here, Higher Ground, Baba. Thoughts on spiritual healing for warriors. Baba, tell me about this book and what motivated you to write this book.
Well, interestingly, I want to say brothers who were incarcerated did. Now, of course, every book that I write, and I think everyone who is about the business of elevating African people, of making us better frontliners, they write not only for us, but they write for themselves. Because, when you write, it helps you to clarify things in your own mind. I'm not this perfect spiritual being, but sitting here writing this book helps me to make it clear for myself relative to the front line. Relative to doing the work of warriors. One of the most, okay, I'm getting away from your question, but one of the most important things in this book is about what spiritual healing looks like for a warrior, not just spiritual healing, which is what we're seeing a lot of online, but what does spiritual healing specifically look like for a warrior? For a warrior, for someone who knows that we're at war, someone who has engaged the enemy, somebody who has engaged the enemy within, and someone who's engaged the enemy without. But the what really led to the writing of the book, I don't even know how many years now. I guess it's going on quarter of a century. I've been writing to brothers who are incarcerated, and a number of years ago that became a newsletter because there were too many for me to respond to in the time that I have. So one of the things that I noticed from questions, from points that were being made, from responses to quotes that I would give from people who were serious warrior spiritualists, was they didn't want to hear it. They didn't want to hear it because they immediately associated with religion. They associated with the church. They immediately associated with ineffectiveness. They immediately associated with the demasculinization or emasculinization of African man, removing, turning you into a pacifist, turning you into a peaceer versus turning you into a warrior. So they rejected that outright. They didn't want to hear anything about it because of how they felt that it would affect their ability to be good warriors. So, this is a major part of our power. Absolutely. As warriors. That's what comes and gives you the strength to do the things that you need to do. That doesn't take anything away from you doing the work. It doesn't take anything from you doing the work harder than anybody else. And I think a lot of it has to do with how we have misdefined spirituality. We don't understand. Well, there's so many contradictions. We'll say, the creator's inside, the spirit's inside, and we're vessels carrying blah, blah, blah. But then we act like that power is not there for us to use. We act like that power cannot add to what we're doing. We act like that power is not guiding our decisions as frontliners. Because if we're talking about spirit, really in a nutshell, we're talking about Ma'at. However, whatever ethnic group on the continent you're talking about in terms of their spiritual system, the principles are there. Just like we say, the oracles of Ma'at, the way of African people in terms of spiritual system, religious systems, that's a foundation of Christianity and Islam and all the rest of this. Well, if Ma'at is a foundation of spirit, because to me, if you say spirit, you're saying Ma'at. When we think about spirit, I mean, some people, I guess, think about in terms of being able to pray for forgiveness or to get, more money or whatever the case may be.
That's what people say, Baba. That's what people think.
For me, it's about the power that's supposed to come with that so that I can do the work I was sent here better. Period. That's it. And if I'm African and my spirit is African based, which we get into discussion of Asili, which, that's a way of describing the spirit of African people. The foundation of that is Ma'at. The foundation of that is Ma'at. So me being truth, justice, order, balance, righteousness, reciprocity, I'm being Ma'at. I'm being spirit. I'm acting accordingly. So if I follow the principles that our ancestors laid down, as well as the lessons that they gave us to show us how to be spiritual, one of the things that you constantly see in Kemetic literature, that you need to return order, however, by whatever means necessary, whatever you need to do. Okay. So if order isn't returned, then that's your fault because you knew that you were supposed to return order. You rationalize your way out of it, pretending that you're not part of spirit, that you're not connected to spirit. So higher ground, really, and that, the title came to me from, Stevie Wonder's song, even though I know he didn't originate the concept, but it's the way that song goes that fit this title so well. But we have so many quote unquote spiritual games going on out here that warriors or I should say would be warriors or could be warriors are falling for. All these weakening things that are claiming to have a spiritual center, which are leading them away from the front line. When they look at spirit, I can't think of one person who has been a revolutionary in my book who wasn't seriously in graduate school, which threw me. And, sometimes people say things that you have to think about for years before it really starts to make sense. She said, you're not religious. You're just seriously spiritual. And I said, okay. because I didn't get it at that point in time. I get it now.
Right.
I get it now because you see, when I look at somebody and I see them acting righteously, acting within the principles of Ma'at, doing what they need to do to correct what has been done and is being done to African people, moving in a way that moves us towards sovereignty without concern for the consequences of their action, without being concerned about the opinions of other men of the cloth, being afraid of other men, that might always mind boggled me. But to be moving in that direction, no matter what, knowing who you answer to. I answer to my ancestors only.
Come on, Baba.
Those are the only ones that I answer to. So who is this who is this European to try to correct me, to try to direct my thought? Who is a Negro or lost soul? And I've seen some quote unquote revolutionary Negroes here in Atlanta. So it's not just where you see, suit and tie, if you will, and working corporate, what have you, or the government. But no, I've seen some seriously super revolutionary Negroes, and you can tell them by their agenda.
Come on, Baba.
And in the end, their agenda is to integrate us into society, but without them being disappointed every day by people, dissing them based upon the color of skin. That's all they want.
That's right.
They're not concerned about sovereignty for African people, even when they're pretending to be concerned about sovereignty for African people. They want to be sovereign within the framework, within the space of Europeans.
Facts.
And that's not sovereignty to me. So when I say a revolutionary Negro, that's what I'm talking about. That's those individuals. And when I first started walking along this trip, I was really impressed with them because of their knowledge base. And then, of course, I began to really think about the philosophy, I say, when I was faculty at Chicago State, where these folks' whole philosophical framework was built on Marxism. And I'm saying you're following the lead. And Jacob Carruthers said something. Dayz said something very interesting to me. He didn't say it to me. He wrote it in
Intellectual Warfare, Baba?
I believe it was intellectual. It was near the end of Intellectual Warfare.
Okay.
Where he said, it's interesting how these quote unquote revolutionaries, African revolutionaries, you hear them quote all this great stuff and be following all this great past, but nobody who they mention is us, unless the person is pacified. They don't mention any names. They mention all the Asian names. They mention all of the Latin American names, leadership, all the rest of these folks who quote unquote led revolutions, but they don't mention any African names, like Africans didn't have revolutions. You don't one time hear them mention Haiti. You don't hear them one time using those names involved there. Okay, and they may use Toussaint Louverture, but even then, that's a teeny tiny piece. And that piece doesn't compare to me to Dessalines relative to revolutionary connection. Don't mention Bookman. Okay? They don't mention any of these, but they mention all these Asian, leaders and led Korea and led China and all the rest of that, but they don't mention, and when they're fighting, they're not fighting for African people. That's just a part of the equation that in a way they have to, because that's what they are, and they would be called out for what they are if they didn't name us as part of it. Because you can't miss them. And they'll use African names. When they use African names, they'll use them to bring African people into the fold so they can turn them into revolutionary integrationists.
And Baba Amin, shout out to Baba Amin at Huru Academy. He said they want acceptance, Baba, not power. They want acceptance.
Yes, absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
He's 190% correct. That's exactly what they want, but they have it couch or clothes.
Mask. Yeah, clothes.
Yes,
cloth. Yes.
Within the idea, because that's what will attract the following. They need numbers. If they don't have numbers, then they can't influence Europeans to accept them. That's just like if you don't have anybody behind you for Europeans, they're going to completely and totally dismiss you because you have no power relative to them. So they use what they look like and names of quote unquote famous Africans. And some of their names shouldn't be used because of their background and their character, but they use Africans and African names in order to attract following, attract numbers. And when you look at the numbers, I look at some of these revolutionary organizations, you have gender confused individuals, you have people who are sleeping with Europeans, you have all the rest of this stuff, but because they appear to be revolutionary, they're put up on a pedestal as if they are our voice.
Mm-hmm.
And you see them, when they see somebody who's talking about sovereignty, they isolate them. They ostracize them. These organizations do in the community. They spend a lot of time talking about these individuals in a way that, they're reactionary or something. They're not the real Africans because this is about humanity. It's not about African sovereignty. But I know I got off on another.
No, Baba, I love when you go in. I love when you go in, Baba. I just sit back and I just take it all in. Family, make sure that you go and grab his book, his new book, Higher Ground. It's right here on his website. And all I did, family, I went to akabenhouse.com and then I clicked on author's books. And so what I'll do, family, is drop the link in the chat. I just dropped the link in the chat. I'm going to also show it on the screen, family. You can go to akabenhouse.com. When you go there, click on author's books, and you'll see all of Baba's books right here on his website, family. Okay, akabenhouse.com. Click on author's books, and it'll take you to all of his books, his entire collection, family, his entire collection. All right. So make sure. And I think Baba had maybe 70%. I think I'm at maybe 75% Baba. About 75% Baba. So we appreciate you. And we look forward, Baba, to reading this book and just, and unpacking it. And I love how you define spirituality. You said spirituality is ma'at. And you said when people are moving and living in ma'at and restoring ma'at and maintaining ma'at here, that is spirituality. You said a lot of people, when we think of spirituality, and don't get me wrong, Baba, I don't, people who meditate, and that's fine, the yoga and the meditation and stuff like that, that's cool. And we sit there but people think that is spirituality. But what I loved, in your definition, spirituality is more of an action, right? And it's an action. It's a verb, and it's an action, towards sovereignty, right? African liberation and sovereignty. So it's an action. It's not just meditating and, like you said, and trying to pray your way out of things. Is moving and shaking, right? And and being a warrior for ma'at. You know what I mean? And so, Baba, I love how you define that. Baba, let's jump into Kuka.
Okay.
Let's jump into your book, Kuka. Remembering the middle passage through the eyes of our ancestors. This book, Baba, I know that you wrote it some years ago, and you've been doing I believe I would call it a ceremony, sacred ceremony, every November. You said second or third week of November, where you talk about Kuka and the importance of us remembering the middle passage through the lenses of our ancestors. The reason why I'm saying, Baba, that this is more important than ever is because there's a growing movement. It's taking place more so online. You don't hear about it in the community, but you hear about it in the virtual community. It's a growing movement of people saying that it never happened. And I would say agents, Bob, and you and I talked before publicly about how, sometimes people aren't, agents per se that the government may be paid for, but maybe an agent of chaos or agent of confusion or someone to bring disorder, but an agent of something. And so you see these agents, they're in the virtual community, the online community, and they are pushing the narrative that the slave trade never happened. And I'm talking about, and they know the evidence. We see the autobiography. We know they have the records. We have the ship records. We have the ports. We can go right over to Africa and different places, Brazil. We see the forts around in the Caribbean and in South America. Hell, even in North America, Baba. You see the forts. You see in spite of all of this evidence, you have people that are pushing this thing that it never happened. That that is the white man's history that he has imposed on us, and we are lying about that. I mean, Baba, I had the pleasure of going to and when I say pleasure, it wasn't pleasure going to the plantation, but just seeing the names of our ancestors and where they were from. And I'm like, wow, like that, I felt it, Baba. And so I had the, I guess I would say the honor of going to the Whitney plantation down in New Orleans. And I went there, Baba, and there was a brother, serious brother. I mean, his name is escaping me right now. he did some research where he found as many names as possible from records and newspaper clippings of Africans that were brought to New Orleans. And I believe the year was 1719. And he gathered so many, names and where they came from and, different places. And so Bob, he has this beautiful monument that they put up with all of the names of thousands of Africans. Then they also had the names of the Africans who were enslaved on that plantation. Then they have a memorial or a tribute to the children that were enslaved and died on that plantation. So Baba, like, to me, Baba, is very sickening. It's very disheartening. It's very disrespectful that there are people who look like us who are promoting this stuff. The Middle Passage, none of that stuff ever happened. We were always here in America. We're not from Africa. None of that stuff. That's the white man telling you all you're from Africa. We've always been here. We're the copper color people in the history books of America. This is what they're pushing, Baba. And so they're saying this stuff never happened. And so when I think about this, I say, golly, they need to pick up this book and remember the Middle Passage through our lenses. And this is more important than ever because, Baba, people are forgetting. People are following these fools. And, and people say, well, Dr. Maat, why do you take time to address these people? It's not even really the people. It's what they're doing, Baba. They have platforms with 500,000 young people who they're convincing that this never happened, Baba. And so I'm going to pause here and ask you, Baba, what are your thoughts about this narrative that is now being spread that we aren't African and that the slave trade never happened or the Ma'afa never happened, Baba? What are your thoughts about that?
If I had thought that we could get this ridiculous in our mental side, I could have predicted this 20 years ago. Because you see us generation after generation after generation becoming more sub-integrated in the European society. We have become more and more, and we have to find ways to make ourselves think and act like this never happened, that Europeans didn't do this act, that this never occurred. When you can erase that, and of course they know, and Europeans know that if you can erase this memory from the children, they're targeting children here just like they're targeting the children when it comes to homosexualization of African people. They're not really dealing with the adults. The only adults that they're really dealing with are the ones who will become good messengers to deliver the lie.
Facts.
But they're targeting the children. So I saw it coming, I can see into the future. No, but I saw it coming when this they never brought us here movement came along, and the rationale that there's no physical evidence, there's no ships, none of the rest of that's there, and you could see where the next step was going, that this didn't possibly happen. And it's logical when you're talking about people who are in such great denial of who they are. They're running with so much speed from who they are. They still, when I was a child, we didn't want to be connected to Africa. The maps of Africa were smaller. African people were backward. We saw Tarzan, Johnny Weissmuller, whatever his last name was, left and right. We saw these things. And when we started to move out of that, if you will, into the 60s and into the 70s, white folks recognized what we were doing, and they began to turn that around and correct it and to bring in we started at Morehouse really in the where I saw this going on. Indiana and I saw this going on in the 80s, and we looked at the colleges across the country in terms of the quote unquote revolutionary faculty, and we saw the removal over that whole decade of the revolutionary faculty from these college campuses being replaced by two things: liberal, quote unquote, liberal African Black faculty and homosexualized African faculty. We saw those two things taking their place. And when they came in, the message to the students was, these were the radicals. These were the revolutionaries. These were the ones that you need to listen to. And of course, the students don't know. The children don't know our story. They haven't read it. They're listening to whoever is in the class. I got to take this history class, or and they're getting the messages there. Right. They get information. I got to take this literature class. I get that. So that helps to accelerate. But all this is tied to self-hatred. That concept, that mental concept where we will go any route, we'll follow anybody, we'll appreciate anything that denies our past, that denies that we came from that denies that we still have to, that we should stand as a people, that denies that we're a people. That's been very much, I mean, you can bring this super individualization within Western society into the equation. You can bring into this equation the labor market. You can bring into this equation HBCUs.
Come on.
Who have systematically gone through the process of keeping us away in general from our knowledge of self. But because that's the only route for some of us to receive a quote unquote higher education, then we send our children and they just get even further confused about who they are. So it doesn't surprise me. And of course, I'm not in that social network like, you know, a lot of folks are and need to be, but it doesn't surprise me because we still hate ourselves. We are still deeply involved in self-hatred and in denial of who we are. And if you can change that past, then the hatred is going to go away. Just like if you can, it's the same logic. If we can create a gray race, if we can create a race where we can get all the blacks and all the whites together and all of them have babies for, you know, 2 or 3, 4 generations, and there'll be this quote unquote gray race, then racism cannot exist because you won't be able to identify anybody based upon a race. So if we can remove this story from existence through the young folk, because what the young folk know, that's what they're going to pass on to their children. Exactly. And if they don't know who they are, then their children their children will be willing to kill you. You know, not that we have homicidal generation, but the children will be willing to kill you to deny that they came from Africa. That's already set in motion. Just like, and I keep coming back to this because to me, they're not separable. The homosexualization of African people. You have now this latest generation, which is willing to remove you from existence. For saying that this is not African. For arguing that this is not natural, that this is not normal. And when you go into their world, and I've seen glimpses of it through the students that we've had, when you go into their world, that logic, that heterosexual logic does not hold anything. It doesn't hold anything. So technically, and I'm trying not to sound like a pessimist here, but that's a done deal in that community. Now, elder sister said something to me many years ago, a very powerful elder sister said something to me years ago. She, it was when the homosexuality book came out. And she said, I'm so glad that you wrote this, you know, blah, 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 blah. She said, but we've lost. And she used the word lost. And then she qualified it. And I understood perfectly what she meant because it threw me. She said, what is going on, in a sense, has taken on a life of its own. And it's taken on a life of its own because it fits the insanity of being here. It fits the logic of us trying to be European in order to be human. It fits that logic. This is what they are. And in order for us to be them and they have the power, we have to become like them in every way. We don't have to question. We should be questioning anything they do, any way they think, any of their logic. We just need to become them, and then we will become powerful with them, and they won't see the color of our skin anymore anyway. But she said, so our job is to make sure that the ones of us who do not want to go in that direction and the children who have not been taken with that are protected from that. So it's like for me here, this is the same thing with these children. I'm not going to sit and argue, and the children will sit there and argue with you about it. I'm not going to sit and argue with a child. I don't care how that sounds. I'm not going to argue with a child, right? Grown or based upon their age, over something that I know to be true. Because as the ancestor said, if you argue with a fool, no one can tell who the fool is. So I'm not going to sit here and do this. I didn't get into these arguments when they say, well, there's no evidence because there's no boats. Well, what's the shelf life of a boat, a wooden boat?
Come on, Baba. Right. Okay. Right. What's the shelf? Right, Baba.
What's the shelf life of the boats? What's the shelf life of a house in this country?
Right.
Okay. Where are the ships that were involved in the Civil War?
Right.
Between, quote unquote, North and South. Where are the ships that were involved in the Revolutionary War? between Europe and quote unquote Americans.
Right.
Okay, so all of this evidence is gone. It's dust in the wind. But when it comes to evidence of our enslavement, it has to be seen. It has to be visible. European can tell you all the fantastic lies in the world, and you can't visibly see anything, but you believe it because they said it. But when it comes to our story, to admit that our enslavement happened is to admit to the barbarity of Europeans. That's first of all, and they can't do that because that's who they want to be. Whether they want to be that in terms of the skin or just the cultural mentality. That's what they want to be. They don't want to be anything African because they've been taught that everything African is backward. Communalism is ugly because it takes away your personality, your identity. All of those lies that have been put out. They believe that. They firmly believe that. And I'm not just talking about young folks. Most of the folks, I imagine my age, are firmly caught up in that. So they believe the idea of us not being enslaved mainly because they cannot believe the idea that Europeans are that evil. Just like Europeans had to remove spirit from science in order to make it this objective thing. If spirit is kept into the analysis of science, then they will automatically be shown for what they are. So they had to remove that so you can't see it. So you have to remove the enslavement of African people. Do you know what they did to us?
Come on, Baba.
In our enslavement?
Come on, Baba.
What do you say? The median age for an enslaved person was, I think, 16. So that means half were below, half were above working these fields. The average lifespan of an African on the island of Haiti, from the point of arrival is 7 years. You will work to death in 7 years.
Teach, Baba.
Okay. So we don't want to hear that. We don't want to talk about how, in order for us to get the range of color we have in this country, how much rape had to occur on a daily basis for centuries.
Teach, Baba.
Up until now, it's still going on.
Teach, Baba.
Whether we're talking about involuntary or voluntary rape, because you can be mental and look. I remember this black girl talking, a very dark skin, beautiful. And we shouldn't have to say like that's odd.
Right, Baba.
This beautiful black young lady, she was a college student. She's upset with her ancestors because they didn't make themselves more appealing to Europeans, so they could have been raped, so she'd be lighter. This is the mentality we carry with it. That's insane.
It is insanity. It's sick.
If we see somebody walking down the street and they're talking to themselves, I use this example, I don't know how many times, and they're talking to themselves and they're fighting the wind and they're going off and they're cursing and they're loud, all over the place. We say, yeah, something's probably, wrong with that person.
Absolutely.
When we see an African walking around thinking and acting like a European, we act like that's sanity. They're out of their mind. They're completely and totally out of their mind. But we look at it like that's normal because that's our aspiration. Our aspiration is to be them. Our aspiration is to act like progress as defined by Europeans, where everything that came before is irrelevant unless it was something that Europeans created that's supposed to be good for man or humanity, or, well, in fact, that they would be considered a part of humanity. Because if we go into the wisdom of our ancestors, based upon the definition they gave of humanity, of being human, Europeans don't qualify. And the reason that they've made that definition normal, that you were just born to two people, is because that allows them to be human. And we're not going to question that. So when you're in charge of the definitions, they're in charge of the definition on that little simple thing of being human. They have defined it in such a way that they qualify. And as long as they qualify and therefore they're in charge, they have the resources, they have the destructive capabilities, then we're just dark-skinned Europeans, I guess. And the problem with us is not our story. The problem with us is that we're just not trying hard enough. We're not trying hard enough to get into their beds. We're not trying hard enough to get into their corporate bedrooms. We're not trying hard enough to run away from African people. You got to think about in the 60s, the goal of all of these programs for Black folks, whether you talk about working class, lower class, even middle class, was to escape the Black community.
Oh, yeah, facts, Baba.
Yeah. What kind of mentality did that instill? What kind of mentality does that instill in a Black child when the Black parents will work 2 or 3 jobs to get them into this white school? What kind of children aren't stupid? No. Okay. They can put 1 and 2 together. They might not be able to articulate it very well because their social understanding is fairly limited. They're children. but there's some logic in there that they pick up on. Okay? If my parents are putting me with these people, and my parents are supposed to be caring for me, provide and protect, and they're putting me with apparently they trust these people and they think that this is the best thing for me, or they wouldn't put me over here in the first place.
Facts.
So that child develops what? This love and appreciation for his or her enemy. Wanting to be nothing but his or her enemy, wanting to talk, walk, sexually be, whatever his enemy is. It doesn't make a difference because they associate all of those things. This is what's critical. All those things with power. And we forget, as African people, your character was as important, or should I say more important, than your aspiration. And your ability to move into the aspiration was intimately connected to your character. What we have done within European society is that we have allowed our thinking to see character as disconnected to aspiration. So we can have people who are leading, who are speaking to us, who steal from us, who rape our daughters.
Come on, Baba.
Who create organizations that don't exist.
Come on, Baba.
The enemy, who are pushing us in the direction of sub-integration, but because they are so articulate, because they are so handsome or pretty, because they can say so charismatically lies, we will follow them even if they're beating their wives at home.
Come on, Baba.
Even if they are stealing from us, even if they are writing lies, even if their best buddies are Europeans who are openly homosexual, or white females who are supposed to be our spiritualists. And we follow them because they know this history right here, or they know this history right, or they say they sat at the feet of this person, or they're related to this person. And we follow them because they are articulate and they're entertaining. So we're not looking for truth anymore. We're and essentially like that. We're not our ancestors, because our ancestors would automatically dismiss them because of the quality of their character, because they didn't want the society moving in that direction. They did not want a society that was ugly. They did not want to see each other as enemy. They did not want to have dishonest people running their world, they didn't do that. There's ample historical evidence of that. And we're not getting it. We're acting like the European way is the human way. That's the inhuman way. That's the most inhuman way that's ever operated on the face of this planet. That is completely and totally, we're living in a completely and totally anti-Ma'at society. Every principle, oracle of Ma'at has been turned on its head and glorified as being the correct. Look what we call each other and act like it's a compliment. Look how we treat each other and act like that's love. Look how we treat those among us who want us to be whole. Okay. Look how we treat those in terms of good treatment of those who want us to be whole within the framework of a dispossessed, disempowered European who just happens to have some melanin in their skin. How we treat each other is all the evidence in the world, what we aspire for our children. People are afraid of African-centered educational institutions because they think, and I've heard this excuse for many, many decades now. They use this, it's going to make him hate white folks. I'm like, and? The thing is, though, I don't see that. We've had many students come out of Akron. Okay, and I don't see any one of them walking around trying to shoot, hate, beat up on, blah, 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 white folks. I don't see that. They know who they are. That's what they know. That's what they learn. And they become African, those who are, I'll say, the best of our students. They become African because they understand that's what African-centered education is about, not learning some our story, not learning about some pyramids or the base of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Okay, that's peripheral stuff to the concepts, to Ma'at, to African spirituality, to thinking like an ancestor, to living up to the ideals of a Jegna. Those are the ideas that make us African, not what we wear or what organization we're part of.
Teach, Baba.
And they don't want that. Most of us don't want that. And even though they may not be able to, again, articulate it, they're scared to death of not pleasing Europeans, even when the Europeans are not around.
Mm.
I've seen people do things that show fear of Europeans without them even. Europeans weren't even in the neighborhood. And in fact, one of the best examples of that for me was myself and a brother by the name of Mario Beatty. I think he's at Howard now. I think he's still at Howard. Mm. We were standing on our front porch. Our front porch, and we're talking about something having to do with Urugu. We're talking about something about that, and we stopped, I guess, about the same time, and I can't remember if it's him or I said, yeah, we're talking about Urugu. Urugu is in the middle of our conversation, and they're not even here. They're not even in the vicinity. Okay? And that doesn't mean, and I need to see I guess the point that was just made. Yes, we're going to do it to ourselves. Mm-hmm. When you corrupt a culture, that was one of the things they don't talk about in terms of the young men. Okay, when you have a community who provides for itself, that is self-sustaining, that trades with other communities, and they build and they have rights passage programs for their sons and daughters. When you have that, and then someone comes in and corrupts that, then you interrupt the cycle of that culture. You interrupt the movement of that culture. So you have boys who are growing up now in the process of becoming men, and the rites of passage program isn't there, and they take that energy and it gets wrongly directed because somebody says, well, I'll give you this, or I'll give you a horse, or I'll turn you into a warrior if you just do what I say, or if you come this way. So we have Africans, and Chancellor Williams talked about that so well in The Destruction of Black Civilization. What caused this? And I would imagine that he started that because he received a question like I did from a relative. Said, how did this happen to us? Mm. And they didn't say, we were so great. How did this happen to us? No, it's just, how did this happen to us? Mm. How did we get to this low point where we kill each other? And I hear people all the time dismissing that, well, we do it. We kill black folks. Whenever you talk about it, they don't understand the cultural mentality that got us to this point. They don't understand how you can take people who did what we did, not just Kemet, but who did what we did, and reduce them to the point where they can't even see the basement of the pyramid. Mm. They don't want to see the basement of the pyramid. They want to dismiss the pyramids. And in fact, they want to believe the lies that Europeans or some aliens created it. Okay. What has to be done to a people? What has to be done to a woman to turn her into a prostitute?
Baba, I see it all the time. And I'm talking about you got women, sisters that are walking down the street, Baba. And I'm not laughing because it's funny, because it's not funny. Right. Walking down the street, Baba, in negligee. Mm-hmm. You got women, black women on social media, Baba, twerking. I'm talking about pregnant. They showing butts, breasts. It's like in my brain, I said, damn, have you no shame? You don't have and it's nothing. People are applauding it. Yes, girl. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Oh, get it, girl. Like that's, and I was talking to your wife about this, your compliment about this when she came on. They consider that they've made that women empowerment. So now women empowerment has been equated. Women empowerment is the ability basically for a woman to whore. So the more you whore, the more you are empowered. The more you're liberated. They think that. So they've equated liberation and freedom with whoring, prostituting, showing your butt and breast to the world. That's now empowerment. You know, Baba, and I was looking at a video clip today that somebody had posted, thousands of views. It's a rapper. I don't even want to say her name on this broadcast, but it's a rapper. She wears red hair, so everybody knows who I'm talking about when I say the rapper with the red hair. She wears red hair. She's pregnant. She's on stage showing her, clapping her butt cheeks, Baba. She's doing splits. And people are like, in the comments, like, what is this? Baba. Okay. But that's what it is now. So I'm sorry, I had to interject. As soon as you said the prostitution, Baba, that hit a nerve, because I've been talking about that for a while. These women think, like you said, whoring, prostituting, showing your butt, showing your breast, and to the world and getting paid for that. That's whoring. That's prostitution, Baba.
Absolutely.
But that's what we've become, Baba. And going back to what you said when you were talking about homosexuality, I remember Dr. Wesley Muhammad was on the broadcast with me, and he said,
one of
he's
my
like,
Morehouse students.
yeah, look, he said, in the next 5 or 10 years, because he has a daughter, he said, my daughter, she's young now. He said, but in the next 5 to 10 years, or even when she becomes an adult, they're creating a genderless society. He said, one day, it won't be a thing. It won't be a thing, right. Even though we know it's a such thing as gender. We know there's a such thing as male and female. But he said they're moving towards, it will be no distinction between men and women other than our genitalia, so that's what they're going. So you can dress however you want to dress, screw however you want to screw, whoever you want to screw. Yeah. And that's the type of society he said is coming. He said it's coming, it's coming, it's coming. So Baba, let me ask you this. How can we, that's my second question. My first question is this. Baba, when you wrote this book, did you see it coming that one day we were going to forget? Like, did you see that coming? Because it's Kebuka, right? Remember in the middle passage through the eyes of our ancestors. Did you write this book because one day you said, damn, we're so mental sided, we're going to forget? Is that why you wrote it, Baba? I'm just curious.
And the answer is yes, but not directly. I was just amazed at the number of us who had no idea who, because they were disconnecting their intellect from their feeling, where they couldn't grasp the magnitude of what had happened to us. I wasn't even thinking in terms of this is going to be, no more. We're not going to be recognizing this anymore. I was, of course, hoping that people would read it and say, oh, okay, well, we need to think about it. We need to take it back to our communities, our family reunions, et cetera, and make it understood better. But what threw me, the book started when I was teaching at Morehouse.
Wow.
And I was just like excuses started there too. And so did homosexuality and feminization of African males. What I did as a faculty, and some folks understand, I would come to class. I'm trying to make this short. I'd start the class and I would hand the students a syllabus. And I said, here's the syllabus. Here's what's due on this day, this day, this day, this day. Here's your textbook. I said, you are responsible for the material. You're responsible for the quizzes, for the tests. But I'm going to talk about what I want to talk about. So we would spend time talking about things, survival, guns, Freaknik came around, class would break up for, a couple of days in terms of the discussion of only that. But when it came around to me talking about the Middle Passage, they were, of course, I had their attention, but it was like the light would be gone in a week. The understanding would be gone in a week. And I said, we're not getting this because we don't feel it. It's like we're talking about some other people. This happened to some other, it's not us. It's just something that happened in history, and it is done and gone now. But I said, we have to find ways to make people feel it. And the first thing that I did, and I said, to me, that was like, that's what a professor's supposed to do. You're supposed to make your students understand to their heart what you're talking about. So the first thing that really got me going was the numbers. And I said, they can't really imagine those kind of numbers in terms of the numbers of us that were murdered in the Kemetic Ocean. They can't, it doesn't register. I said, so I thought about it. I seriously thought about it for a long time. And then, okay, here's what we do. I drew a huge silhouette of the United States and then divided it into fifths. And this was the first time that I did it early on at Morehouse. And I erased one of the fifths. And I said, all that's left on the board, that's how many Africans were murdered in the Middle Passage. The next time that I did it, because the population had grown and the understanding of numbers for S.E. Anderson and a few other folks had grown, and I drew the map on the board and divided it into fifths, and I erased the whole country. And that's how many Africans were murdered in the Middle Passage. They got that. You saw them in pain. They got that. So that helped me to realize, maybe the problem is, and I may be mistaken, I said, maybe the problem is that we just don't feel it. Because when you feel something, then you act on it.
Facts.
When you feel something, it's different. You tell me something, but if it hurts me to my heart, I'm probably going to do something. Okay. I can hear about all of the, homeless children and prostitution and all the rest of this. But if I'm like, man, I see somebody who's hungry and like they're like hungry, and I hand them a hamburger, The worst thing I could probably handle. But I hand them a hamburger, and the person eats that hamburger like they haven't had a meal in a month. Okay, so when you feel these things, my father was shot in Vietnam. He got a bullet that went in his back and came out his side. It took out a huge chunk. He was in the hospital exactly 365 days. Exactly 365 days. And they had him on a liquid diet for like the first 2 or 3 months. And I'm a little boy. Okay, I'm in like the 5th grade, 4th grade, something like that. When they gave him food, this is my father. This is the man. This guy was tall enough to look down on me. Okay, this man ate that food like he hadn't eaten in years, and that tore my heart up because that was my dad. That's my father.
Right.
When we feel stuff like that, then we act on it. That was one of the intents, or the major intent. Not just one of them. That was a major intent behind writing Kuka, and it taking me what it took me to write Kuka. And a lot of people don't understand because they don't get the story. When Kuka left his house, the day that Kuka left his house to go to the printers, my nervous system gave out. I didn't walk for 3 weeks. I was in the emergency room. I don't know how many times. It wasn't funny. I spent those first 3 weeks laying on a pillow across a coffee table. I was editing Menticide, laying across a coffee table. I couldn't eat. This is the first time from drugs trying to come off of oxycodone, hydrocodone. This is the first time that I've experienced withdrawal issues. So when I was young, drugs, cool. But this is the first time, because there was so much pain, I was taking that left and right. I could not stand. I could not move off of that table. I spent the next 6 weeks out of the class. That was the time that we had to reduce the number of students here because the discipline that I applied in the classroom is different than NEI's discipline. So you had some boys in there and girls in there who thought they were going to run it. So we had to remove some students at that time because I couldn't be in here. So an elder sister came to me. She said, you needed to write that book. The ancestors helped you to write that book. The ancestors wanted you to write that book. But as soon as you finish writing that book, they let you go, so that you could go through the process of healing from this. And I am laying on across that coffee table, and I'm praying. And like I said, I'm not a church person. I'm up here praying. Please don't ever let me have to go through any kind of, I'm sleeping laying across a coffee table. I'm going to the bathroom laying across a coffee table. I didn't leave that spot. I came into the room. I'd been in there 2 weeks. I came into the room from the classroom, and my back was facing the door. I comes into the room, and I hear her start to cry. And she was crying because all of the form of muscle in my legs were gone. She didn't see any muscle formation whatsoever from that. So that book, even though it's the smallest book that I'd written at that point in time, it was the hardest book for me to write. The Homo book is 10, 20 times as large, but it didn't take from my heart. It didn't take from my spirit. It didn't take from my feeling what Kuka did. And I had planned, when I finished writing Kuka, to write a book similar to Kuka about plantation life for enslaved Africans. And I gave up on that idea because I said, I don't ever, ever, ever want to have to go through anything like that again. I guess I need for people who have the book, for people who will get the book to understand this was not a joke. This wasn't just a sit down and write. And I had to go do this research. And anybody who writes knows that you have to reread what you wrote 30, 40, 50, 60, 70 times.
Yes.
So it flows the way that you want it to flow.
Yes.
So I'm having to go over what happened to us. The rape, the beatings, the food, the being on the slavers, the ships, the arrival. Okay, I didn't even talk about what happened at the point of capture or before that, or the wars or the rest. I didn't talk about any of that. I just talked about from the point of capture to the arrival on the wharfs here. That's it. If I had to do this over again, I don't know, with a new life, I don't know if I would. I might try to pass the idea on to somebody, but I don't I've had, 2 back surgeries. I've had, all kinds of mess in my life, but none of them compared to the pain of that. Physical, mental, nothing compares to the pain of writing that book. And I'm thankful. Before all that happened, I reached out to brothers who were incarcerated because we have a lot of artists. We have some serious artists, but we have some serious minds behind those bars. I remember this brother who had read Urugu something like 8, 9 times, sending me a letter saying, "Can you help me to understand this?" I'm saying, "You read the book? You want me to do what?" But it's like when I put out the call to the brothers, I said, "Well, I'll trade," because the art that I wanted to use, the pictures I wanted to use, I learned that you can't use an artist's original drawing or painting, but if somebody draws that picture from theirs, you can use that. Every picture in Kuka was written by a brother who was incarcerated.
I didn't know that, Bob.
Every picture in one of them, the one he drew, 2 of the pictures, he's in Mexico practicing holistic health practitioner. One of them, sadly, he came out and was back in within like 3 months. But they would tell me, okay, I said, well, tell me what books you want. And I'd get the books that they wanted, and we trade that for what they drew. So that was, it wasn't just my effort. This was a communal effort. As you find the brothers who are locked up all the time, they want to contribute. And I can't show you well. I tried to show the students this morning. I can't show you well a lot of the pieces that brothers who were locked up drew, sent, painted, et cetera, et cetera. One guy made this beautiful akabin on the back of a cardboard box that he stole from a big box of fries from the kitchen. That was what he used as as what he drew, what he painted on, what he drew on. It was pencil and some kind of magic marker. So these guys, they contributed to every picture in there.
And I see him, Bob, in black and white. I see him right here in black and white. I see what you're talking about.
Yeah, I would send them the picture of what I wanted, and they draw there. The one that was changed the most was the one of the coffin lines, and I said,
"Yeah, I'm looking at that. I'm looking at that now, Bob."
It had a black person in there driving some of the enslaved Africans. I said, "No, we can't do that." Propaganda is used by everybody. And I want them to understand what the major coffin lines were about, because we're not responsible for the pictures that we see anyway. We didn't write the diaries. We didn't write the books. Okay, we didn't study the coffin lines. We didn't record what was going on in the dungeons. They did. And they didn't go anywhere near what was really going on. We have to understand this. This was through the eyes of the ancestors. You have to understand the mind of Urugu, what is capable, what is done. And then you have to transfer that understanding to what probably happened. I don't need to see a written record. I know them. You can imagine a bunch of sadomasochists or just sadists, because sadism was named after a European. Masochism was named after a European. Those words just didn't come out. There was Count Dayz. This guy, he brought prostitutes into his house and parties for entertainment to produce pain in them for the entertainment of his guests. That's where the word sadism comes from. Okay? So when you look, you can imagine a sadist, and I consider the vast majority of them, we're not going to talk about cannibalism, but imagine a sadist with a captive audience of Africans, and he's going to say, "Well, no, I can't do anything to them because they're African, or they're a captive, so I really don't want to do anything to them." I can imagine, right? So we have to be able to understand what happened to our ancestors based upon that. I'm not really worried about. I understand the impact of that. I can't stop it. I learned years ago, I can't worry about things that I can't do anything about. I can't stop Negroes from trying to prove that we originated here or that we never came here enslaved. My job, Dr. Maat, your job is to make sure that those who want to know the truth.
That's shame.
Because you can't make anybody African.
That's a shame.
And you can end up wasting so much time trying to convince people who don't want to be African what it means to be African. And we don't have time. We don't have the energy for that. But we do have the time and energy for anybody who wants to know, who earnestly wants to know what it means to be African. What happened to us? The mind of Urugu. those individuals need to know it in the greatest crystal clarity possible. So the book Kuka, it's like the tip of the iceberg, because we have to use our imagination. This is a foundation for you to think out of in terms of understanding what happened to us. And that's what we try to do every November. We do the presentation. We've had presentations where, 70, 80 children were involved in the demonstration of the positions. Cramped in spaces. We started out, I believe it was five children doing this. And, each one is a story in and of itself. But I will tell folks, and I'm trying not to do like this furniture company did in Chicago, but I'm getting a little older. I'm not anywhere near close to old, but there are things that require certain levels of energy, rehearsals, other stuff that isn't at my disposal in the way that it was 10 years ago. So I'm telling folks now, this year is going to be online because of health issues. 3 months ago, I was on crutches. Okay, so, but now I'm walking fine, perfectly fine. But it was a warning. It was a second warning to me. Slow down. Stop doing this or stop doing that. So ENEI decided for me that this year's Kuka is going to be online. And I decided for me that next year we're going to do Kuka live like we always done, but that's going to be the last year that I do it.
Baba, the last year, Baba?
But we're going to make sure it continues. I just won't be doing the lecture. Okay. I won't be doing it. We're not going to stop it. We're going to make sure it continues.
Okay.
I can't.
You can't. Right. It's too much.
It's gotten to be too much. And I hate, it's like you got your ego and you don't want to admit.
No.
You can't do that. But it's gotten to the point, and I want to do something that Ali missed out on. Stop it when you are at the top. And even though I love Ali, he should have stopped a few fights back. So I need to stop while I can still do this the way I want to, because when I'm giving the lecture, it takes over. ENEI will tell me all the time, about how it's like not me some of the times in terms of how I say some things. And that takes a lot, consumes a lot of energy. So we're looking at this one online, and of course we want people to be there. If you can't be there in person, then be there in spirit and take some of that day. And I know there are other days that people are celebrating in terms of this, but it wouldn't hurt us to celebrate 365 days a year. This.
Come on, Baba.
But we will ask folks who can't be there, who would like to be there, to be there in spirit. And make sure the ancestors know that you remember what happened to them and not forgotten and not erased from the story of Negroes and lost souls and Urugu. We have to remember. And I'm going to slow down with my work. We were talking about things that are going on in the house now before we came on.
Right.
I'm going to make sure that I keep it at a very low level. And even though a year is a long way away, I want to keep it at a very low level so that when I do Kuka, which is always my favorite lecture, when I do Kuka next year, I can do it live and with no problems. So we're looking forward to it. But I do, as you keep putting up the book, and I keep telling folks, it's me doing the lecture, and I think people get a lot out of it. It's like the difference between a book and a movie.
Right.
It's a major difference. You sat down with it. One of my Jegna, who was the ancestor, Larry Obadeli Williams, when I was writing the book, and Larry Obadeli Williams, most folks don't know him because he was behind the scenes, but he was John Henry Clark's right-hand man. He's Remember My Niece right-hand man. He's Sybil Clark's right-hand man. Whenever you saw her, you saw him. He was the man responsible for bringing Sheikh Anta Diop here to Atlanta. Nobody knows. But this guy was like the community, I might even say national repository of photographs. You always saw him with a camera, recordings, lectures, books, everything. And he got the book. He always would come by. Whenever I wrote a book, he'd be at the door. All right, 5 copies, 6 copies, whatever. He's going to distribute them to whoever he wants to distribute them to. He got the book, and he called me. I think he got it like Tuesday or Wednesday. He called me that weekend, and he said, make sure that when you sell this book to people, you tell them not to read it at night. He said, make sure you tell them not to read it at night. He said, I could not sleep. And this man is steeped, or I said, he's an ancestor now. He's steeped. He's like miles beyond me as far as I'm concerned. He was steeped in it. And you could see in his eyes something was the next time I saw him when he came back to get his stuff, because he brought a whole shopping cart and a suitcase full of articles, books, maps, magazine stories to the house when he found I was writing Kuka, and said, here's information I have on it. When you get finished with it, just let me know. I'll come back and get it. But when he came back to get it and he had read the book, you could see in his eyes, not a seriousness, because he was always serious, but a pain.
Yeah, pain. That's what I was thinking, Bob, in my brain. He was hurt.
Yeah. And he knew. He knew, he was clear that it was more than the book, that what we were told was maybe 1% of the story. So, we do invite. I don't like asking people to come to this painful event, but this is something that we need to do. They went through it, but we can't go through it. Okay. They went through it, but we can't learn about them. Or we just go call their names and we don't know anything about who they were or what they went through. We're going to act like that. We're going to act like how we're taught to act like history. Just read it, and it's, don't touch it. Don't become a part of it, which allows them to distance you from who you are in the first place. When you don't know when you don't know your story, any lie will do. So when we don't know this, then they can tell us we didn't come over here. They can tell us we weren't dragged over here kicking and screaming. They can tell us that we, just popped up out of the blue here, or this was, Turtle Island, of course. We know that's what the indigenous folks call it, but that was where we came from, where we lived. All the rest of this stuff is just hogwash. And where is the evidence? They show you a picture of an indigenous person who's dark skinned, and they say, see, okay, Africans were over here, yes, but we didn't build their empire. I mean, folks need to read Williams, not Eric Williams, Capitalism and Slavery.
Yep, I was thinking it, Bob. I saw when you were saying Eric. I saw the cover of it, that white, blue, and brown cover. I was like, I know what he's talking about.
Yeah, economics. These folks were in the dungeons. They were at the lowest point ever, and then miraculously, how did they get this wealth? They just came into Africa and they left us alone. They just came and got the wealth, and we kind of like gave it to them because we were stupid. We wanted to trade beads for, what have you. You understand the mentality that wants to take you there. Oh, and also, this is the before the 15th of December, there will be another book out, and it's called Rights Fundamentals, because we are not creating rights of passage programs, just like we're not creating African-centered educational institutions. And we are creating quote unquote rights of passage programs that are producing Negroes, that are validating this insanity. So this book deals with the mentality that goes with the people who are supposed to be creating these programs. And I did a presentation online, I guess about a year ago, which was called Rights Fundamentals, which is the same name for this book, which talked about how we need to develop our rights programs if we're producing warriors. If we're not producing warriors, well, the book is irrelevant to you. If we're producing punks, we're producing, Peachers, then, what difference does it make? In this comment right here, which to me I find extremely interesting about the cutting off of hands and naming Africans who made only a teeny tiny fraction of what Europeans made. Europeans have never gone anywhere and won any wars without traitors.
Right, facts, Bob.
Everywhere,
That's why
everywhere.
I was looking at the comment. I just went there, like he says, traders everywhere.
We find tippers here in this country. We find them all over the place. Okay, so that's not unusual. And once you have been corrupted, and that was part of the downfall of Kemet, the corruption from inside.
Facts,
Bob. We're not sitting up here blameless.
Right, Baba.
When John Henry Clark made a statement, which I read at the end of the K. Buka lecture, about, we were involved, and tragically so, but there is nothing compared, nothing compared. So people want to throw out this name, or they want to throw out that name, like they had some major impact on the enslavement of African people, or they profited to some degree, such a degree from African people. That's not the case then. That's not the case now. Okay, you see some black folks who walk around, this billionaire, this millionaire. You have European males, single European males in this country who control more wealth than all African people combined in this country.
Facts, Baba.
But we want to use one little person, sort of like how we'll use one European who was lynched to justify, to explain away the thousands of Africans who were lynched. Because that one European was lynched, we're going to say, okay, well, all that balances it out. That makes it so we don't have to look at this as a racial thing. No, just because we contributed to it, we have people contributing to it now. Significantly. Some who look like revolutionaries who are contributing to it now. That doesn't take away from the fact that we're not in control of the process.
Facts, Bob.
That we're not benefiting from the process. That we don't control the process. We don't make any major or minor, really, political decisions in this country that will direct or benefit African people. We just had a quote unquote president who first thing came out of his mouth to make sure he was perfectly clear. I'm not in it for black folks.
That's what he said, Baba.
He made that perfectly clear from the get. So we understand who he was about. We understand who the quote unquote black folks who are so rich, where their money comes from, who they control, who controls them, who their friends are, who they're sleeping with. We understand that. I don't even engage in discussions like that because they are so minuscule relative to the scheme of things. They don't compare with what's going on in this reality. Europeans are determining everything. They're determining the framework out of what we think. There are so few of us who recognize that this is horribly wrong and anti-African, that European society is completely and totally anti-African, anti-Ma'at, that it's not funny. And what they do, they will turn us against those individuals. They will have us kill our own so they can continue to rule. That's where traitors come from.
Facts.
Deequa Armour talked about it. Well, it was either in 2000 Seas or The Healers where he talked about the traitors who told on us, okay, who went against us, who profited from us. But he also recognized that profit in no way, shape, form, or fashion compared. Okay. How much does King Leopold and his boys make off of that 10 million plus Africans that they murdered in one African, quote unquote, African country? How many Africans in South Africa are now somebody? But who is De Beers? Okay. Who runs Azania, South Africa, completely and totally? And anything that's built over there, like Oprah School. Oprah School was designed to produce more Europeanized African girls. That was the whole purpose of the school.
I believe it, Baba.
Okay. Straighten their hair immediately. Okay. The mentality, everything that went with that fit the agenda of Europeans. So I could probably, I come out of University of Chicago. So all those opportunities open up to me. I don't know how many business cards I received from politicians, department chairs around the country. So I could have become maybe a super Negro. I don't know. But I chose not to become that. And because of that, the Negroes knew what to do with me. Nobody from the University of Chicago called them and told them what to do. They weren't having that meeting, but they knew who they worked for. They knew who they loved. They knew the sound of somebody who was not in love with Urugu. So these little insignificant people, presidents of HBCUs, they're not running them. The vast majority of money that's paying for each and every HBCU is coming from Europeans, not us.
Oh, facts, Bob. That's facts.
The vast majority. And they're directed. I began to look at that. I've always loved studying wealth. I've always, grad school, that was part of my research in stratification. In fact, that was what my dissertation dealt with, wealth versus income. And I looked at when Morehouse finally decided to have an education, not department, but an education program, because the white folks had already filled all these slots. The damage had already been done. So when they started doing that, I looked at where some of the grants were coming into Morehouse from these white institutions. And they were directing what programs got built up and which ones didn't. And the money was being earmarked for the business department at a time when businesses, private sector, were downsizing, and their children were going into the social sciences. So they were tracking, and they continue to track our children out of competition with theirs. Because they control the flow of money in these schools. They're the ones that rule it. And we're trying to pretend like they're us because the vast majority of the student body.
And that's all it is, Bob, is student body, because the faculty does it. The faculty at HBCUs no longer look like us.
No.
The faculties are Asians, they're Arabs, Middle Eastern folks, Asians, people from India. They no longer look like us. So, you'll go, like, I remember the students at Howard, they were complaining about that, Bob, saying that, hey, I came to a HBCU to be taught by someone who looks like me. Right. And they're not even getting that, like, even though I know someone who looks like you may not have that mentality, but they're not even getting someone who looks like them at this point. They're getting someone from a totally different culture, Baba, at these HBCUs.
I remember I was acting chair for 1 year. And you have to go to all these meetings, which I hated because I like the classroom, but had to go to all these meetings. And at one of the meetings of the, it was a collection of the quote unquote elite faculty and some of the chairs, and, you discuss policy for the faculty, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm listening to this guy who came in from the president's office, and he's talking about money that they need to bring in a diversity in the faculty to Morehouse. And I'm thinking, what kind of diversity? And he starts naming off what you just named off. And I, with my dumb self, I said, well, what about Africans from the continent? And my question was ignored, completely and totally ignored. And the one faculty in the social sciences who was African at that time, they removed him. I tell the students here, because I try to emphasize stuff. The two things, one's related to something that we talked about a minute ago, where when I'm trying to get them to understand that things happen, that they need to be prepared for stuff, that they need to make sure that they know what they're doing, that their power is intact by, vocabulary, whatever. And I would tell them, no one was born, or was a little child that says, when I grow up, I want to be a crack addict. That absolutely doesn't happen. Now I forgot my other point. But for me, that point is particularly important for the young folks because it causes them to think. No child was born and said, well, when I become, 13, 14, 15, I want to be homeless. That's my highest aspiration. When I grow up, I want to be a prostitute. That's like the ideal for me. That's not what happens. Those things happen to us. And it says something when they disproportionately happen to us as a people. And of course, I forgot the other point that I was.
It's okay, Baba. It's okay. But Baba, I wanna just drop a bomb for you, Baba. Fire! 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 Yeah, hold on, Baba. There you go. Fire! 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 had to do that again, Baba. I want to say Asante Sana for coming on tonight, Baba, and just, talking about your work, Higher Ground, Kuka family. Make sure that you visit akabenhouse.com to grab his books and many others, family. I'll make sure that I include a link to akabenhouse.com in the description of this video, family. Before you cut out of here, thumb up the video, thumb it up, thumb it up, thumb it up. Also, family, if you're not watching on YouTube or you may be watching on another platform, or you are watching on YouTube and haven't subscribed to my YouTube channel, be sure to subscribe to my YouTube channel, right? Come on over to YouTube, type in Dr. Edward Maat, subscribe to my YouTube channel and hit the notification bell so that whenever I go live, you will be notified. Baba, do you have any closing words for the listening audience?
First, I'm grateful for being here. I would also remind people that there is a study guide for the Higher Ground, and there's a book study guide bundle, a little discount there. But of course, we want as well. I'm not writing for my health.
That's right.
And, so it's like for the community. So these are ideas that we at least need to think about. If we're frontline, if we're supposed to be warriors about the business of empowering, making African people sovereign, then we need all the power that we can get. And our power comes from our ancestors. Our power comes from spirit, as well as the work that we do ourselves. So I appreciate being allowed to be on here always.
Oh, we appreciate you, Bob.
Kudos to Dr. Maat. Kudos to the folks who are in the audience. A great number of the faces I've seen before, and not just here. So I appreciate them being there. I appreciate folks, listening, thinking about the things that we have talked about. And of course, I'm going to also ask that folks, support Dr. Maat. Make sure that the word gets out. If we have voices and we have good voices, then let's make sure that they are supported, that they are defended.
Thank you, Baba.
All right. So, I'll say Madasi, Dr. Maat, and of course, Bibi Fahodie.
Bibi Fahodie, Baba. Thank you so much. Family, you heard from the great Baba Baruti family. Make sure that we support him. And I agree. Baba said, I'm not writing these books for my health. Get the daggone books, family. Go to akabenhouse.com. Grab the books. Okay. And we got to do stuff like that, man. We got to support, our warriors, our scholars, right? And support them while they're here. Baba, I noticed that what typically happens, somebody transitioned and the books fly off the shelf, right? So come on, man. Like let's support our warriors, our scholars, our educators, like you said, our voices, while people are here amongst us, right? Let's support. So family, I know the words are nice in the chat, and that's great, but it'll be great if you go on to akabenhouse.com and you grab his new books, okay, the study guide and the actual book, Higher Ground. Okay, and make sure, family, that you also grab his book, Kuka, and then also, family, attend his lecture on November the 18th. Baba, what I'm going to do is buy the virtual online, ticket. Okay. I have something going on from 12 to 4 that day. I'll be speaking at CMOTEP in New York. Important. But as soon as I get out of that, Baba, I'm going to log on from 6 to 9. Because you're right, Baba. You said, and it resonated with me when you said, look at what they all went through. Look at what they experienced. Can we not take 3 hours to reflect, to remember, to mourn, right? And what happened, to educate ourselves on what happened? Can we not take 3 hours out of our day to do that? And I sat back when you said that. I was like, wow, So I said, I'm at that event from 12 to 4, and I'm gonna shoot right back to my hotel in New York. And from 6 to 9, I will be logged on, Baba. So I'll grab my ticket when we get offline. So family, make sure that you join me in grabbing the ticket. Let me go to your website right now. Well, not your website, your Facebook page, because you had the flyers on your Facebook page. So family, let's make sure that we connect. Let's make sure, family, that we're in the building, that we support this. And Baba's saying he ain't doing this much longer. He said he ain't doing this much longer, family. So we need to soak up all that we can soak up right now while he is doing it. And so I'm going to share the flyer again, family. You see it's going down on Saturday, November the 18th from 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, okay? 6 to 9 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. For more information, You can email Mwalimu Baruti at yahoo.com, or you can call him at 404-753-7237. Also, family, look at this. Here go the registration details. All right. So you see right here, you can pay via PayPal or Cash App, and make sure that you include your name, Kuka, and also an email address where they can send the streaming link to you, family. Okay, so these are the registration details. And again, family, I will make sure that I'm going to put the website in the description box, and I will post the flyer on my social media pages tomorrow, just in case you didn't catch it in this live stream. Okay. All right, Baba. So I appreciate you, Baba. Make sure that you check your message. I'm going to shoot you a message in probably about 5 minutes when we get off air. Okay, Baba? But please make sure that you check your message again, Baba. Thank you so much for coming on. Asante Sana, Madase Pa, Abibi Fahodie, Baba.
Sikitu, Abibi Fahodie.
You heard from our warrior, family. You heard from our warrior, and he was powerful. I was getting all excited. I don't know if you saw me over here clap with my feet. I think that's probably when my internet went out, family. But you heard from our elder, our junior elder. He always says, I'm not an elder yet. I'm a junior elder. I'm an elder in training. But you heard from our elder in training, our Baba, our warrior, our scholar. So, family, make sure before you get out of here, you thumb up the video. Thumb it up, thumb it up, thumb it up. Also, share the video if you're on Facebook. Post the link if you're on Twitter. Tweet the link, family. If you're on any social media platform, just share it. Also, copy the link, throw it in a family group chat or a friend group chat. All right, let's get the word out. Let's each one teach one. And we can do that easily by simply sharing, right, discussions. Family, make sure you join me this Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. This Thursday, 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time, Brother Garfield is going to come on a platform. And we're going to be talking about the biblical Israel versus the state of Israel, right? Because people think this is the same thing. When they're hearing Israel, they are really equating Israel with the biblical history, right? Are they the same or are they not? So, family, make sure that you tune in this Thursday at 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Family, thank you so much for tuning in. I mean, I really appreciate it. You guys could have been anywhere, right? Listening to anything, but you were right here with Dr. Maat and Baba Baruti, right? And so I thank you for your view. I thank those who did thumb up the video. I appreciate those who shared the video, because guess what? You didn't have to do it. So I'm grateful. I'm grateful. I'm grateful. Thank you so much. Hopefully I will see you on Thursday. Abibi Fahodie.
Let's combat and fight back with MELTREK. The war of the minds, they want control of the masses. And Common Core, they dumb us down in the classes. Without knowledge, we can't gain access. Build with the elders, take notes and write classes. We keep whining on the block, how it's gonna stop? Let's start supporting our own, make their supply drop. We buy stocks, then we buy blocks. Cause we know the truth and we tuned in to Dr. Maat.